Hello and welcome back to my channel. I've decided to pick up a few sequels to the series of books that I have started and to try and finish them, except obviously I did not know at the time that some of those were not the last books in their series, but just the continuity of them. So two of them are mystery/thriller and one of them is fantasy. So here is the fantasy one. It's the Deck of Omens and it's basically the follow-up to a book called The Devouring Grey. This follows a bunch of teenagers in a small town somewhere, and basically our main character has just arrived in town because her family is from there, and she realizes that she's part of some weird legacy where all of the parents of those teenagers, so I think it's a group of, I can't remember, 4 or 5 kids, but basically all of their parents are the founders of the town, and as the founders they have special powers. Their families have powers that are all unique to each family, and the reason why they have these powers is to help the town be protected from this kind of monster that lives in the grey, which is like a kind of mist that kind of surrounds the village, the town, whatever. I'm not sure I'm explaining this right, but this is the premise, basically. And I really enjoyed the first book and really wanted to read the second one, and I'm pretty sure this is the last book in the series. Now, the other 2 books I'm going to be reading, funnily enough, look quite similar, but they're both sequels to YA mystery novels where we kind of have young detectives, I want to say. The first one is F.O.X.E.S by M.A. Bennett. This is the follow-up to a series that started with stags, then we had dogs, and finally we have foxes, and I think there's another book that's come out recently called Tigers, so this is not the end, but when I was reading this one I did not know that there was yet another book coming out, I think, so I kind of thought, oh, it must be a trilogy, but actually at the moment it's got 4 books in the series. The first book basically follows this girl who goes to a very elite school, boarding school in England somewhere, and she realizes that the students have a kind of like cult thing that they call the medievals. It's all the popular kids, except that they're not just popular, they're also anti-technology, they don't like phones and things like that, and that's why they call themselves the medievals. One of them is this really handsome kid called Henry, and our main character starts fancying him a little bit, and she gets invited by him. Her and her couple of friends get invited by him to his estate for the holiday, for the long weekend, and they call it for a weekend of hunting, fishing, shooting, or something like that. But soon the kids who all got invited, including our main character, realize that they're the pariahs of the school, and the reason why they were invited by the cool kids is because the hunting is hunting them. So the first book was just brilliant, really enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed myself in the second book as well. I love the secret society cult mystery thing. I think that's really the type of thing that I love to read in books in general, and the fact that it's YA makes it also fast-paced and easier and just like a really quick read. So this is the 3rd book in the series that I'm going to be reading in this video. Then finally, the last book I'll be reading in this video is Good Girl, Bad Blood, and this one is by Holly Jackson, and the first book was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. So we follow the same characters, but a completely different story. In the first book, our main character Pip decides to investigate this crime. I can't remember if it's a murder or a disappearance of this girl from her school who disappeared/died a few years back, and the main suspect that they accused of the crime was her boyfriend at the time, and his little brother is in her class or in her year or something, and they decide to investigate together to clear his name because she doesn't believe that he did it. And it was really fun. I enjoyed myself so much. It was also kind of light-hearted in a way that's really fast-paced, and yeah, it's exactly what you'd expect from a YA crime novel. So this is the 2nd book in the series, but from the synopsis of this, it's basically another story that's going on with the same investigator. So we still have Pip as our main character. She's still investigating alongside this guy Ravi from the first book. So we have the same characters, but just a new mystery, and I quite like that as well. So yeah, that's the last book I'm going to be reading. Okay, so I have now started reading the Deck of Omens and I'm 100 pages in, so I thought I would give you a very quick summary of what's going on without going into spoilers, because this is a video about sequels, so I can't exactly tell you some of the stuff that happens in these books because that might be an actual spoiler about what happens at the end of the previous book. So in the first book, called The Devouring Grey, we follow Violet Saunders, who moves with her mom to a small town called F.O.X.E.S. Her family is actually one of the 4 founders family of the town. And the 4 founders families basically all have magical powers, and every generation there's an heir, someone who inherits the most powers and becomes the main person to hold the powers in the family. So the 4 families founded this town a long time ago and imprisoned a being called the Beast, that is pretty much a monster, into a sort of parallel universe. It's kind of like the Upside Down in Stranger Things. It's called the Grey and it's like a virtual like prison thing. And when they did, they kind of decided to found the town on top of that location or something. So the problem is that the Beast is now pushing at the boundaries and the founders have to patrol and kind of protect the town from potential attacks because some people are showing up dead and it's linked to the Beast kind of pushing at the boundaries of its prison, the Grey. What it means is pretty much that the kids are gonna have to be the ones to start protecting the town and kind of help each other out. But there's a lot of internal drama and conflict going on between the different families, a lot of things linked to the past and what happened between the kids' parents in the past as well, and the fact that some families are very close together and some hate each other, and yeah, it's a big old mess. And what I have found reading the first 100 pages of this book is that it took me a little while to get back into it, just because although it wasn't that long ago, I think maybe 3 years ago, I don't remember a lot of what happened in that first book. It just took me a long time to remember who was who, what their powers were, whether we were meant to root for them or if we didn't like them. I couldn't remember a lot of what had transpired in the previous book. And there's not that much of a summary about it in this book. Like, there are passages, I think it's well written, like there are some passages where you have a little bit of a summary of what happened at the end of the last book or something, but because it is given to you as like drops, so it's not like a bunch of information at once, it's like here's a little bit, here's a little bit, here's a little bit. It was hard to kind of focus and remember what had happened previously and just plunge straight back into it. So I kind of feel like I would have enjoyed the beginning of this book a bit more if I had remembered better, if I had reread the first book straight before, but I didn't really want to reread it. And I was kind of hoping there would be enough reminders throughout the pages for me to figure out what was going on. I do also think that it's partially because it's one of the flaws of the first book. It's that there's a lot of lore, like so much of it. There's, from what I remember, so much information and different things going on and different conflicts and different alliances and drama and everything that is just a lot. And I think it's good in a way because it focuses on so many different characters that you do have development for all of the main characters, but also because of that lack of focus on one main character or 2 maybe instead of 4. I think maybe even 5, because we do follow mainly Violet, who's just arrived in town. There's Justin, who is one of the Hawthorne family's kids, and he is like kind of the golden boy in the first book. May, his sister, who's able to read the future in cards. Then we have Isaac, who's part of the Sullivan family and they're kind of like really good with knives, and he can open portals into the Grey, and he's always been helped by the Hawthorns, so he's always been under the wing of the Hawthorne family, so Justin and May. And then we have Harper Carlyle. So there's 5 main people that we kind of follow, and she's from another big family. We don't follow, thankfully, her brothers and sisters because she has a lot of them, but that is actually 5 main characters, and we're not having like a first person point of view for each, but we do have like every passage focuses on a different character, which is great, but also can become quite confusing, and it was just hard to get back into it because of that. Apart from that, I do have to say that I am enjoying the atmosphere so far. It's quite dark and grim, but fun at the same time. I am really enjoying kind of the mystery of the Grey and the Beast and how they're gonna defeat it, and just that it's very Buffy-esque in some ways. Like, they're patrolling at night to figure out if there's anything going wrong, and I do love books that kind of have that Buffy vibe. So I do enjoy this. It's just that it was a little bit hard to follow.
In my mouth is a desert, running dry on the tip of my tongue. I can taste your lies.
So I've now finished reading the Deck of Omens, and I ended up rating it 4 stars after putting it through the co-pilot system, so I thought I would let you know my thoughts on it first. So after struggling a little bit at the beginning just to remember everything and remember all the different characters and their powers and their roles in the story and what had happened in the first book, it does help you plunge back into it after a little while. Like, you do have a few reminders of what went down in the previous book, but they're just not all at once. It's not an info dump, so it was a little bit hard to remember. But after a while I did remember a little bit more, and it was just a little bit easier to get into the book again. And I have to say, one thing about this book is that I couldn't stop picking it up. Like, I was really enjoying myself reading it, and I kept wanting to pick it up. So even if I do think that it's got a lot of flaws and there's quite a few things that I didn't love as much, especially compared to, I think, my taste now, because I feel like, although it wasn't that long, it feels to me like the first book in the series I read so long ago, and my taste has really evolved since then. And yeah, I still enjoyed myself reading it. I did think it was really fun and fast-paced, and I wanted to know more, and yeah, I was having a hard time putting it down. But the thing is, I do actually think this is more of a guilty pleasure for me. I can really see the flaws of this book and the series in general, and I feel like there's many things that could bother other people, and for me it was just something that I was enjoying while knowing these flaws were there. Hello again. So I've now started reading Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. So I think I've already introduced this book. It is the sequel to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which is a mouthful to say. It's a YA thriller, and unlike some of the other sequels I've been reading, it doesn't follow exactly the same story. It's more of a separate story, just with the same characters as detectives, really. However, now that I have actually started it and I'm 100 pages in, there is some follow-up actually to the previous book. It's very well done, where basically our main character Pip is currently doing a podcast, and she's just released the last episode or something of her podcast that she calls A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. And this is the podcast that kind of summarizes everything that happens in the first book, who the murderer was and all that. And basically there is a bit of a summary of it. You hear some bits of the podcast that kind of give you a summary of what happened in the first book without you having to reread the first book. And I really appreciated that, especially after reading the Deck of Omens, because as much as I enjoyed the Deck of Omens and it slowly reminded me of what was going on in the first book, I was so freaking lost at first. I was just like, I don't remember who the characters are and what their character arc was in the first book, and just who has stakes where. So it was really confusing to read it at first, and this one was not. You also have a lot of the consequences to what happened in the previous book that are discussed in this one, such as the fact that Pip doesn't want to be a detective anymore. She doesn't want to do this anymore because, well, some people got hurt, some people got upset, and she kind of, in the way that she investigated, she may have made some enemies as well along the way, people who just didn't appreciate being a suspect, for instance, things like that. And also she uncovered a lot of secrets that people kept as secrets for good reasons, so sometimes airing out dirty laundry is not always a great idea and can really upset people around her. That's what she discovered basically from that first investigation she did. So she's adamant that she's never gonna do it again, and she's like, okay, I will do just a follow-up with mini episodes of what happened in the first opus of her podcast, and instead of doing a season 2, she's like, what I'm gonna do is mini episodes with summaries of what's going on whenever people are going to trial, things like that. So just any little bits and bobs that kind of just finish it off nicely. However, she does have a friend who goes to her and tells her, look, my brother went missing after the ceremony last night, and it's not normal. He's not acting like himself recently, and we have a hunch, me and my mom, that he's actually gone missing. He didn't just go to a friend and forgot to turn on his phone or something. she's like, okay, let's go to the police and just make sure that there's nothing they can do, because they say, oh, we've already tried to file in a police report, and they're basically like, oh, he's a very low risk person and we're not going to do anything about it. We don't have the manpower for it. So she decides to say, well, I'm going to try and use my influence now that I know them a little bit from last year and try and impact them so that they're actually going to do something. She does this and it doesn't work. And she's finally like, okay, do you know what? I'm gonna take care of it. Fine. I'm gonna play detectives again. And I'm gonna do this for you because you're like one of my best childhood friends or whatever. So that's exactly how this story starts. That's it. I'm gonna be reading the rest of it, and I guess I will let you guys know once I finished it how I feel about it. Okay, I'm wearing the same shirt as earlier just because I actually finished reading this book in one day. I mean, I started it yesterday and then I finished it today, so the last time I talked to you guys is the same day as today. I can tell you already that I ended up rating it 4 stars. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was super fun. I have one complaint and one complaint only. It is kind of based around the characters. I'd say that there's not much happening in terms of the romance that started in the first book, and it's just there, like it exists. It's just become kind of a background character and we don't hear much about this romance anymore. They could just be friends. It wouldn't change a single thing, I want to say. Like, it doesn't feel to me like it was romantic at all. It just feels like they could be best friends and that would be the same feeling to me. However, that is literally the only thing that I would say is not the greatest about the book, because it's not even that bad. I don't really care that much about it, because the mystery in it was so good, and the story of our main character Pip trying to solve it was so good. I really enjoyed following every step, every clue, every hint with her. It was just so fun that I don't think it matters that much to me that the romance aspect wasn't really there. Like, it doesn't. It's just one thing to say that I didn't like as much. That's all. So we do have passages in this book towards the end where it feels like not everything is completely finished, not everything is wrapped up, but the main stuff is, and the things that aren't wrapped up you kind of expect to be potentially in the next book, since it is, I think, a trilogy. It might be more than that. Maybe Holly Jackson is going to write more than 3 books, but at the moment there is a 3rd one coming at some point, so I'm very excited that I'm going to be able to pick it up because I finally finished this one. Hello, so this is me talking about F.O.X.E.S because it is part of this video where I am reading sequels. However, I am also reading it as part of this little readathon that is the mini version of the 1,000 Doors readathon that Books and Tea with Tasmin, Meg with Books, and Drinking by My Shelf, all 3 channels have come up with this readathon together, and it's really fun, and they're doing a weekend-long one this time. And as part of my second prompt, I picked up F.O.X.E.S, which is one of the sequels I was going to read for this video. So I'm already talking about this book in one video, and to be honest, it's also a very clear sequel to the first 2 books in a way that if I tell you anything about it, I feel like it might be a spoiler to the first 2 books. So it's not like I can really talk that much about it without giving spoilers anyway. So I'm not going to talk much about it. I'm just going to tell you vaguely my impressions, and I am so far on page 200, and basically I am really enjoying it. It's going super fast. I think it's the right pick as well for a readathon because that's what I'm doing it as part of, and it does read fast. Like, it is a YA novel and it feels like a YA novel. Not in a bad way at all, because otherwise I would just DNF it, because there has been YA novels in the past that have felt too young for me. This one is kind of in the middle, and I am enjoying that because it just makes it so much easier to read it quick and enjoy myself and then just move on to the next book. I would also say, and this is me repeating myself from this other video if you've already seen it, but basically I do think that it holds up. as a book of its own, which is really nice. As in, even though it's a sequel, sometimes when you read sequels, you're a bit disappointed. You might feel like the first book was the best one, or that there's too much of a formula and they're all the same or something. This doesn't feel like that. I feel like it's the perfect continuation. I'm still enjoying the characters. I'd say a little bit similarly to how I felt in Dogs, which was the second book in the series. I don't always love the characters' choices, but in a way that makes me appreciate that they're human beings and realistic, basically. So it is still fun to read from their point of view, what they're doing and everything, and it is quite fun. It's just really fun to explore more and more within this story and this universe, and I am enjoying myself in the third book. I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens because it is linked to events that happened in the first one towards the end of it, so don't want to give any spoilers, basically. Hello again, I have now just finished reading F.O.X.E.S. Yeah, I really enjoyed myself reading this. I think it was just a really good continuation to the series. The characters are still fun and the plot and everything that's going on is really fun as well. It's me again, Malin from the future, just to check whether you enjoyed this video. I hope you did, because I really enjoyed every single one of these books. It was just so much fun, and in a way it got me quite excited by the fact that there are more books out there in some of these series and that they're not actually finished, just because I was enjoying myself so much. So I am quite glad that it's not over and that I get to still read with stories with the same characters. I also have a lot of other sequels that I do plan on reading at some point this year or next year, so there will be more videos like this one where I am reading sequels. But yeah, in general, this was a really good experience. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, consider leaving a comment as well. I always try to respond. Maybe consider subscribing, ring that bell, all that jazz, and I will see you guys in the next one.
In my mouth is a desert, running dry on the tip of my tongue.